Morena, good morning and welcome to this event, Life After School. I'm Bill, I work with CCS Disability Action Waikato. So now we have a couple of hours together, which is a time to get a feel for what some of the options and possibilities for a life after school. I wish to acknowledge my colleague Ray Bealby, Carol Maynard from Parent Waikato, and Linda Terry and Rachel Coffin from Ministry of Education. Together we have partnered to organise the event. Special thanks to our presenters who we'll hear from in a moment. They represent Ministry of Education, Ministry of Social Development, Work and Income, Disability Support Link, Enabling Good Lives, ACC, and Manawanui. And we'll also hear from a couple of people who will share their personal experiences of a life after school. Then there'll be a chance for a cuppa. By the way, they'll only have up to 10 minutes each to speak. We've got a lot to get through, so time's tight. If there is time afterwards, there'll be a chance for questions as well. But at the end of our session, there'll be a chance to mix, mingles, have a cuppa, and to talk to the people from organisations who have kindly offered to be here today to share something of what they have to offer in terms of support or services. So now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Rachel and Linda from Ministry of Education to kick off the day. Thank you.
Kia ora, I'm Rachel Coffin and this is Linda Terry, and we're Special Education Advisors working at the Ministry of Education. We're here today to talk to you about some things that need to be considered prior to transitioning from secondary school. Because transition is a process, it's not a one-off event. There are many transitions throughout our lives, but the biggest for most of us is the one from secondary school. Everyone in the young person's family and wider community need to start thinking about and planning for transition as early as possible to ensure the most success. Starting early provides the young person with lots of opportunities to experience life beyond school with the support of the school team. Secondary schools need to be working with families and young people to support the young person's dreams and aspirations for the future, as well as identifying any issues or challenges that may arise. Transition from secondary school can be a very confusing time for everyone. So it is important to get as much information as possible from as many different sources as possible.
There's a lot of research currently both in New Zealand and internationally that gives clear direction about supporting successful transitions from school. So it's important that those people working with young people must have a commitment to getting it right and be knowledgeable about the process. We need to be talking about life beyond school when a student reaches secondary school. This could mean a change from a traditional IEP to one that focuses on the skills and other attributes that the child is going to need for a successful life beyond school. That plan then, over time, needs to be revisited and revised frequently. Over time, the plan needs to consider things like employment and vocation, income and finances, housing and living arrangements, what supports may be needed, cultural considerations, the possibility of further education, recreation and leisure, advocacy, friends and relationships, and also transport and community and participation and access. So as you can see, there's a lot of things that need to be considered, so it is really important that we begin the process early. The young person needs to be fully included in the process and as actively involved as possible. This might include helping the student research options and giving the student the opportunity to try and explore these. Other students may require a lot more support from whānau and family or an advocate to have their voices heard. Young people, family and whānau need as much information as possible to help with this. Families may choose to engage with a service provider, and we have a number of those here today that you can talk to later if you choose to. We're grateful to Parent and Disability, CCS Disability Action for joining with us to present this information for you today. We have a number of speakers who will come up, and we're going to hold questions over until the end so that you get as much information along, because you might find that your questions are answered by other speakers. Our first speaker today is Julie Laurie, and she is coming from Work and Income. Thank you, Julie. You need to use this.
Kia ora tātou. My name is Julie Lowry. I'm the Regional Health and Disability Coordinator for Work and Income in the Waikato. And thank you very much for the invitation to be able to come here and speak. I do have a PowerPoint, and it introduces me. So I cover quite a large area, from Huntly, Ngaruawahia to Matamata Morrinsville, Te Araha, Coromandel, Pairo, Waihi Beach, plus the Hamilton Metro. So, so I cover that area. There we go, there's my name. So Work and Income can provide a number of supports to people. We look now, as we've had a few changes, and a lot of those changes are to do not so much with somebody's illness or disability, but it's to do with their work capacity. So a lot of even our medical certificates are called not medical certificates, but work capacity medical certificates. So that's an important thing. We look at what people can do, not what they can't do, and we're asking doctors to partner with us, which is why we've changed the name of the medical certificate. We can provide support and can refer you to other agencies that if you want to look at work. So a number of those agencies that Work and Income work with are represented here today, so make sure that you have a talk to them about what support they can provide along with Work and Income. We can help you gain independence, whatever that may mean for you. We recognise there are some people that just may not be able to work, and we support you to gain independence financially as well. So that's the next slide, financial support. We've had a number of benefit changes, some you may know or may not know about. Job seeker support is the old invalids, the old unemployment benefit. That's either full-time work or a medical deferral due to illness or disability, so that's something a little bit temporary. Supported living payment, that is for individuals or carers of people who need hospital or equivalent care. So that's the old invalids benefit. So that covers, we want to acknowledge those who want to look for work, but also, that's the financial support we provide. Along with that, we also have a number of other what we call supplementaries along with the main benefit. Disability allowance is for costs associated with illness or disability. So that might include doctor's fees, pharmaceutical costs, counselling. You need to talk to your Work and Income case manager, and you need to have a disability certificate completed by your doctor supporting that. So that's an important thing to think about with disability allowance. There's also accommodation supplement. So that's assistance with any accommodation costs you might have. That might include board, might include rent. There are other types of things as well. It doesn't cover Housing New Zealand houses because they're already in income-related rent. So that's that. I also want to talk about parents as agents. For some reason, either temporarily or permanently, there may be a time when somebody can't speak or deal with Work and Income, and they need somebody to talk with Work and Income, sort out their financial things, and that's when you can appoint an agent, either parent as agent or somebody that the person knows and trusts. It could be an agency as well. So they can act on the client's behalf when they're dealing with Work and Income. So they can sign paperwork on behalf of that client. They can talk to Work and Income either face-to-face in an appointment with a case manager, or maybe over the phone when they call the 0800 General Inquiries number. The rights and responsibilities are back to the client, so the person who you're acting on behalf of determines what you're going to talk about with Work and Income. and it ends when they choose to as well. So if they feel that they've gained a measure of independence and they can deal with work and income by themselves, then they are the ones that determine that. Now it can be short or long term depending on what the client decides. So it's always client centred, talking about what the client wants. So, very short presentation, but I do have a little stand way back at the back with a couple of work and income brochures on it, very general information. There are 3 of us as part of the team. I'm just one of 3. We're not client facing, so we don't have any client contact apart from when I come and talk to this, events like this. If you deal with somebody, one of the organisations, then they can come through us and I can provide that information. I don't have the angel powers of a case manager, unfortunately. But if you do need further information, there is our website or call our 0800 General Inquiries number. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Linda. Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Lyle Wilson. I'm a National Contracts Advisor for the Ministry of Social Development, and I look after the funding of vocational services for people with disabilities in South Auckland, Waikato and Bay of Plenty. And I'm here today to talk to you about what the Ministry funds and why, I guess. And before I do that, I just want to say, I just thought we'd all be sitting around with a cup of tea and it would be a little bit informal. So thank you, Linda. But I want to acknowledge the work that obviously Linda and Rachel have done in putting this together and the support that they've got from you in being here. So well done. Linda mentioned the work that the Ministry of Education have done with transition from school. And I just want to say that although in her opening presentation she said that transition starts as early as possible and it should start as early as possible, the Ministry of Social Development also are involved in funding services that look like transition from school. And they're called transition from school. And they're a little bit different, and I'll explain that in a sec, but I just want to say that there's 2 types of services that we fund that name individuals. Transition from school is one of them, and another one is very high needs. They're both to do with students in school. The very high needs specs that we have in our contracts are for very high needs OARS funded students after they leave school. So they'll come out of school, they'll bring with them some funding that we can then pay into service providers, and we'll put them onto a contract as an individual. So that's one. The other is transition from school, where we have a group of service providers, most of whom are here for the Hamilton area, who we say you arrange with the individuals or the schools that you want to provide transition services to, and we'll pay for those individual students. Now, the difference that we have to the Ministry of Education is that our contracts say that the service will start in the individual's final year of school. And there's a reason for that, being that we can't afford, we don't have the money to keep paying on an ongoing basis. And NAG, one of the Ministry of Education's agreement with schools and board of trustees, say that the transition starts at year 7, or I think it's year 7 through to year 13, right? The funding that we have is for vocational services for people with disabilities. We introduced transition from school in 2004 because there were a bunch of our service providers that were doing the work that weren't getting paid. So we just said, okay, we'll pay you. So that's how that started, and it's continuing today. So those are the 2 individual types of funding that we have. I'm going to go right back now and start and say, well, what does MSD do when it talks about funding vocational services for people with disabilities? We provide nationwide services to just over 20,000 people, and we have over 200 service providers. In essence, other than the transition from school and the vocational, the very high needs funding, we have 3 different types of services in our contracts. 1 being community participation, 2 being supported employment, and 3 being business enterprises. The funding that we administer at the moment comes under the guidelines of a document called Pathways to Inclusion. And Pathways to Inclusion was presented in Parliament in 2001, and it effectively said that the government will provide funding for vocational services for people with disabilities that will look to achieve 2 outcomes. One was to increase participation of people with disabilities in employment, and the second was to increase participation of people with disabilities in their community. So that's where our contracts have been written from. There is also a set of actions from Pathways to Inclusion document, that 7 actions that we carried out as well. One of which was to repeal the Disabled Persons Employment Promotions Act, which covered sheltered workshops at the time. I don't know if anyone remembers sheltered workshops. But that act was repealed in 2007. The services, or the contracts that we have, are directly with service providers. The government contributes to the cost of those services. They don't fund individuals, okay? Which is very different to some of the other government-funded agreements. So our services, in the main, don't look at an individual and say, this is what you're going to get and why. Okay, our contracts look at the service provider and say, you will work with this number of people and do this kind of stuff. Okay, probably raises a couple of questions. I think we're going to deal with that later on. So I'm going to move on from that. The government's commitment to provide a contribution to the cost of services is very significant in that we don't actually fully fund things. First and foremost, we have a small amount of, or we have an amount of money, it's a capped amount of money, and it's fully allocated. So we don't have the capacity to bring in new people, new services, new ideas, anything like that. We spend what we spend, and it's been going on for a very long time. It's been going on for about 30 years. We've inherited the funding from the Community Funding Agency, and we've continued to do things the same way for a very long time. There is, and Kate's going to talk about it shortly, a new philosophy around called Enabling Good Lives, and we haven't quite caught up with that yet, but we hope to do so soon, in that there are a set of changes around how vocational services and why they will be purchased. At the moment, our target group is people living in New Zealand that are either New Zealand residents or permanent New Zealand citizens or permanent residents, that are aged 16 to 65, that have a disability that's likely to last for 6 months or longer, and those disabilities propose a barrier to work, and they need support to reduce those barriers. That's what our current set of guidelines for purchasing vocational services are. Some of the changes or proposed draft changes that are out there at the moment will change how people will access vocational services. One significant difference being that they must be on a supported living payment with work and income. So that really does significantly change the landscape of vocational services with MSD funded providers. Okay? And that's the draft changes have been presented to providers and disabled persons organisations and other groups at the moment, and we've sought feedback on those changes, and there's been a lot of feedback, I can say that. And so whether the changes progress from here or not, I don't know. But there are quite a few changes. I'll just very quickly outline what they are. There's going to be a new outcomes framework, or the proposed outcomes framework, which have 3 proposed outcomes, where we currently have increasing in participation in employment and community. There's going to be number 1 being sustainable employment, number 2 being a pathway to sustainable employment, and number 3 being participation and inclusion. So it's breaking down the employment part of things and then putting some parameters around what that looks like. So that's the first change. The second change is to ensure that services go to where they're intended to go to. And so there'll be a process by which that will happen. To improve the support people get, to get and stay in employment, to ensure services are accessed by those whom they are intended for, and to trial a work and income process of matching people to outcomes. So those are the 5 proposed changes in vocational services. So I know it doesn't really tell you much at all, but it probably raises a lot of questions, which I'm going to deal with later on if anyone has any. So I'm going to leave it there and say thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the expo, and I'll hand you back to Linda.
Now we have Nellie Harris from Disability Support Link. It's going to share more information with us.
Hello everybody, my name's Nellie Harris and I work at Disability Support Link, which is the Needs Assessment Service Coordination Agency, and I've been there for about the past 4 years, and my role is Needs Assessor and Service Coordinator. So I'm here to talk to you about out-of-home living options that are funded for people over 17 when they leave home. And I'm not good with technology and I don't have lots of lovely pictures, I'm sorry. So what your options are, and these are for people, like I said before, who are over 17 years old. We have residential services, supported independent living, individualised funding, choice and community living, and contract board. Now, choice and community living, at the moment, the Ministry of Health have asked us to put the brakes on that for people who are currently living in the community and wanting to enter into that service. We're waiting for the results of the evaluation, and the Ministry are going to look at that evaluation and possibly may make some changes, but I'll talk about choice and community living a little bit further along. So what is a residential service? Residential services allow people to live in a home-like setting in local communities while receiving support for up to 24 hours a day. If you're not familiar with a residential service, you get support. People get support with things such as shopping, housework, learning to cook or cooking meals, support with your personal care, going out and doing things in the community. It might be going swimming, it might be going out socialising with friends with support. Services are provided in a range of homes, from small flats to larger group homes. In residential services, the home is rented or owned by the service provider. People pay a board payment through work and income, and a residential support subsidy is paid to the provider. People keep their personal allowance, part of their work and income benefits, to pay for their personal costs such as doctor's fees, medication, personal care, personal needs such as soap, shampoo, toiletries, those sorts of things. The support comes from a team of people who usually work on a roster system, and they support all the people living in the home. Homes typically, like I said, have 2 to 6 people living together, and in pretty much all cases people have their own bedrooms. The service provider is responsible for transporting people to and from various places, and each home usually has access to a car or van. And in residential services, homes may have staff sleeping over at night, or in some cases, if the need is there, having support staff awake at night. Supported independent living. This is for individuals who maybe don't have quite as high level of support needs, and the person usually rents or owns their own place of residence, and that could also be in a boarding situation. And in some cases, people might live with like-minded groups of people, or in other cases, they may live on their own. People get their full work and income benefits, and they may be entitled to other work and income supplements such as accommodation benefits, disability allowance, things like that. People are responsible for paying their own daily living costs. That includes power, board, power, phone, rent, all of those things. And the support is based on a person's assessed needs and should encourage and work towards independence and building social, natural community supports. Support's not usually 24/7 and covers things such as appointments, support with budgeting, shopping, cooking, and support to learn household management skills. If a person needs personal care needs under a supported living arrangement, that can come from a community provider. It's still funded through DSL. Providers work with a person to find a flat and develop that support plan. And we have individualised funding, and individualised funding is a way of paying for disability support services, and it enables disabled people to directly manage the hours they are allocated, and that can range from how they do that. They can choose their own support workers to actually employing their support staff and managing all aspects of their support needs. Who can use IF? It's available to people who are eligible for disability support services, and in the Waikato, individual funding is only allocated for personal care and home help. So in other parts of the country there is what they call enhanced individualised funding that takes in some other needs of the people, but in the Waikato at this stage it's still only for personal care and home help. To be eligible, people need to have been assessed by their local NASC, and we usually refer them to an individualised funding host provider. You agree with the NASC and the provider that individualised funding is suitable for them. It's not suitable for everyone. People need to be able to manage their own funding allocation because it's given for the year, and that has to be rationed so that you have enough for the year. And they need to have a safety plan because backup plans to what happens in emergency situations. Contract board is another way of people moving out of home, and it's an out-of-home placement with another family or individual, and the person boards in a home and all the support is provided by the home caregiver. The Ministry of Health contributes to the caregiver's support via a contracted provider, and this is a 24/7 arrangement. Choice and community living is a demonstration, or has been a demonstration by the Ministry in the Waikato and Auckland areas. The demonstration finished in March this year, and it was an alternative to people who met the criteria for a residential service. It's currently only available now to people living in a residential service. And like I said before, it's we've asked to put a hold on new people coming into it. If anybody's interested in choice and community living as an option for their family member in the future, come and see me, because I'm happy to take names of people who are interested, and if and when the Ministry decide that we can expand this, I'm happy to be talking to people. And I'm sure, I think there's some people here. Somebody going to talk about their experiences with choice? No? Okay. All right. So choice and choices, people were able to choose who they lived with and where they lived. They have ordinary housing choices such as renting or owning their own homes. They could choose who provided them with the support from contracted providers, and they had a lot more individual choice about how and when that support is provided. The idea was to improve the connections with family, whānau and the community, and also build natural supports. People were able to take part in everyday normal activities, and they had access, or have access to their full benefit entitlements and the appropriate allowances that work and income determine. The role of the NASC in all of this is to determine eligibility. To be eligible for residential or NASC services, you have to meet the criteria of having a disability, such as a physical disability, sensory disability. ASD, we can provide some support for people who have ASD, such as carer support. We can refer to behaviour support services. And all conditions must last more than 6 months. So that's the role of the NASC there. And that's it.
Morning, everybody. Thank you, Nellie, for giving half the story. It's great. I apologise for these slides because it actually did have our logo on it first up, so I hope none of Manawanui are here. My name's Maria Johnson. I'm the individualised funding coach for the Waikato, Rotorua Taupo and the Gisborne areas, and I only manage standard individualised funding. You heard Nellie talk about Enhance. Don't ask me any questions about Enhance. Okay. So I'm going to just talk to you about what individualised funding is and how it works, how it can work for you as your as a family member who's been through disability support services and may be eligible for the service. So individualised funding is just a funding methodology that allows people personal control over their government-funded supports. As Nellie mentioned, that's around your personal cares or your household management or home help. Individualised funding gives you personal control of the design of your support arrangements, who and how and by whom support is provided, rates of pay, and the money, of course. Not that you don't get the money in hand, but you actually have a budget, as Nellie mentioned. So what do you mean by design of the thing? So you can decide when you need your service. If you're going to a provider, then you might be persuaded by them to have the service at a particular time. If you had individualised funding, you might decide to negotiate with a friend or somebody down the road or somebody that you really like that's going to support you in your home at a particular time. So it might be for a young person, you might go out to a late concert in Auckland and you're coming back at 10 o'clock at night. That's probably early for Auckland. And you need somebody to help you to pop yourself back into bed. That would be how you would use individualised funding, getting the person to help you to get back to bed. You currently might not be able to get that service through a provider. Individualised funding is not new, it's international. And we came late in the picture in New Zealand to start up individualised funding. In fact, years ago it started out as direct funding, and DSL will know about that. So it has different names. So it's called personal budgets, self-managed care, and now it's called individualised funding. And so at the moment it's through individualised funding, can be through individualised funding hosts, which is Manawanui is one of those. There are other host providers in this area as well. And some of the individualised funding is also managed through some of the providers like CCS that might have some hosted individualised funding packages. But the premise is the same, is that you have personal control over the government-funded funding for supports. The key principles for individualised funding is that you have choice, control, and we get this feedback all the time from people who are finding the freedom of individualised funding. Every time we do annual reviews and 3 monthly reviews and random surveys, these are the words that they've given us. It's flexible. You know, getting put to bed at night or support to go to bed at night after a late night concert is really, really flexible, but it actually meets the person's needs. Power, it is quite powerful. However, as a coach, my job is to monitor the budgets. So if you're spending a bit too much money, I'm talking to you nice and early, because I need you to be successful when you manage your individualised funding budget. Freedom, and the person is in control of the money, not the provider. That's not me, not the provider. How does it work? Well, the host provider system is a conduit. So we just filter the money in, and we're an intermediary between the funder, which is the Ministry of Health, and the person. There are virtual budgets. What does that mean? It says that you actually don't hold on to money, and people get their perception that they actually get all this cash in their account and they're going to go out and spend it on support. It doesn't happen that way. You don't want it in any case, because you'll get taxed and you'll have IRD in your back. So they're virtual things, budgets. So you invoice. 2 ways of doing it. You can invoice into our organisation. We claim from the Ministry of Health, and then the payments are made either to your support workers through our payroll system, or the money goes to you and you pay the person who provides the support for you if you are happy enough or competent or confident enough to run your own payroll at home. Some people use contracted providers, and it's a really good option because providers are always there, or you might be already happy with a provider of your choice. Maybe they might have a disability support contract, or they may not. So you're the person is the decision maker around how and who delivers the supports. But you see the black line there? It says within the guidelines. So it's a coach's job to make sure that you know how to spend that money, because the ministry has a very strict criteria as to how you can use that. And one of those things is you can't use it to purchase equipment. And there's a lot more. Again, coaching, my job is to coach the person or the family, or what we call the agent, who's going to employ the staff or contract the person to provide the support. My job is to ensure that you have some good budgeting knowledge and employment advice. We again mentioned that expenditure, ongoing monitoring of that, and if I don't monitor it closely enough, DSL ring me up and say, Maria, look what's happening to so-and-so. So don't like them ringing me up, really. Invoicing the funder for expenditure. So like I mentioned before, you put your claim into our organisation and we invoice the Ministry of Health. We report to the person on their status, so how things are going, and we do annual reviews. Plus we have a reporting requirement, because we have a ministry contract to report to the funder, which is the Ministry of Health. Oh, and that's the only picture I've got on my slides. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jane, and I work for ACC in the Rotorua Serious Injury team. So I'm actually based in Rotorua, and I work with teenagers, so from 16 to 20, 21, however old you think a teenager is. And my job is really to support a positive transition from school. So that's what I do with my day. With me today, I've also got colleagues here from Tauranga and Hamilton who do the similar sort of thing. So I guess I'm here really to talk about a different funding agency and what I do in my role. So when the time is right, ACC can make a referral to transition services. This can start for ACC clients at the age of 14 years, and the referral can be for a 2-year period, and if the need is identified, then we can actually make another referral, so we can have input for another 2 years. So I like to see the input start early, so at about 14, and carry on to when the person finishes school. So the purpose of transition, we've gone over this already today, but is to maximise opportunity in life, to prepare a young person to enter the community, workforce and adult life. We focus on the young person's capabilities, provide supports required to achieve their goals, ensure the young person and their family are making decisions about activities that they are engaging in. We expect that activities focus on community participation and that they increase self-worth and well-being, and we look to establish friendships and relationships. So to talk a wee bit more about the specifics, when considering life after school, we establish goals in 4 different areas. So it's home and living, education and vocation, recreation and leisure, and community participation. So we ask lots of questions, and the types of things that we're looking at is, where are you living? Would you like to consider other options? Would you like to be in supported accommodation or to go flatting? How can this be achieved? What skills do you need to develop for when you leave school? And is there a need to find respite? In terms of education and vocational, we might ask things like, what does school look like for you? Is your course of study appropriate? What are you doing at lunchtime? Is it appropriate to explore work options or further study or activity programs? Recreation and leisure. What after school activities are you involved in? Would you like to find other ones? And how will you engage with people of your own age when you leave school? In community participation, we say, how do you access the things you want to do? Do you need taxi transport? Do you want to get your driver's licence? Or do you want to learn to catch a bus? So there's lots of questions when we're looking at transitioning from school. So for us, we have disability support services as well. Transitions falls under that umbrella of services that we can access for young people to support them as they enter adulthood. So I've talked about transitions. The other ones are supported employment, and that's for individualised vocational support to enable a person to return to, maintain or obtain open and paid employment. We can also access supported living, which is a little bit different to what's been talked about today. This is a one-to-one support person, and they help the person to gain new life skills and to increase the natural supports and community participation. And the 4th service is supported activities programs, and they are group programs which are individually tailored to support increased independence, participation and community inclusion. So in my role, I usually start with a referral to transition services, and in the Bay of Plenty, which is where all my clients are, we work very closely with CCS and have had some marvellous outcomes with our young people. So like I said, we start with transitions and then we can wrap around the other services as the need is identified. So I just thought I'd briefly talk about a case study about a young man that I've been involved with. And I'm called him Bob. But when I first met Bob, he was really keen to leave school, but he had no plans of what he wanted to do. We worked with the school and we made a referral to transition services. With their input, the school reviewed his course of study and they changed it from NCA subjects to a correspondence course which focused on life skills, and that much better met his needs. He joined a drama group and badminton, and that gave him something to do at lunchtime. He was actually really sick of not doing anything at lunchtime, so that was a good thing. And over about 12 months, he went to various different work experience opportunities. He also started going to basketball one night a week, and we found an option for respite. So he goes there from time to time. He loves this and is developing some independent living skills. And for his parents, they enjoy the break and know that they can get away and their son is going to be safe. He's now finished school and he's not work ready. At this stage, he's attending a Polytech course 3 days a week. And he goes to a supported activities program 2 half days a week, and the other 2 half days we have supported living involved. And the goals of that program are to learn to cook a meal one night a week for his family, to he wants to join the gym and he wants to learn to catch the bus to get there on his own. So it's still work in progress, and transitions and all the other disability support services continue to be involved. And finally, I just couldn't resist this slide really. We all hope our kids will be happy and have a good life after school. We want our kids to fly.
Kia ora everybody, my name's Kate and I'm from Enabling Good Lives. My goal today is just to give you a bit of a flavour for Enabling Good Lives. What is this new thing that the government's been promoting and talking about, and also to give you a bit of an update of what is happening here in the Waikato. So I suppose just as a bit of a background really, Enabling Good Lives is something that's been led by disabled people and families from across the country. And it really started about 5 or 6 years ago when the government had a kind of an inquiry and a review about disability support services. And lots of disabled people and families and whānau and providers said, it's not working for us, it's pretty bad, the system in places. Works for some people really well and doesn't work for lots of people at all well. So the government said, let's do some more thinking about that, and did some projects in the Waikato and also in Christchurch. And then just a few years later, in 2012, they said, actually, we need to change radically how we do things in the disability support world, and we're going to make a significant commitment to trying some things that are different and evaluating them and learning about them and trying to make the system more friendly, more easy, more straightforward for all of us. So really, Enabling Good Lives is about doing things differently, and it's about trying things that are different and evaluating them and learning them so that the system changes and becomes easier to use. The other key thing I think about Enabling Good Lives is that it's across government ministries. So many of you would know that you get involved with Ministry of Education for some things, and Ministry of Social Development for other things, and Ministry of Health or Disability Support Service for other supports. So Enabling Good Lives is about bringing those streams of money, those resources together so that people can kind of have more of a whole look and a more sense of control about across their life the resources to support them. So really it is, as others have said, it's about really focusing on increased choices and control for disabled people and families. So why? This slide is really just to signal the voice of disabled people back in the Select Committee and now, and disabled people's organisations and family-led organisations saying, actually, we want to have our voices heard, we want to have more choice and control, and we want to be at the decision-making table. And that's certainly what the government has committed to. So I think that sort of outlines the Enabling Good Lives approach, but the other part of this is really the two demonstrations that the government is funding for a couple of years. One of them is in Christchurch, and that started about 18 months ago, and the other is here in the Waikato, and that kicks off in a couple of months' time at the beginning of July. And as a lead up to that, there's been a whole lot of workshops and forums happening across the Waikato for disabled people, for families and whānau, and for providers who've been coming together to really think about, well, what do we want, how are we doing things, how do we build our networks, and decide whether Enabling Good Lives is something we want to participate in. So those workshops have been going on, and I'm sure some of you have attended them. If you want to know more about them, please give your contact details to either Linda or myself so that we can ensure you're on the mailing list for that. And we've also got a website that's just gone live that has a lot of the information on it as well. So in terms of the Waikato demonstration, it's really a pilot, the old language, new languages demonstration. We've got 2 years to try some things that are different, and as I said, it starts in July this year. There's a group of disabled people, families, Māori and providers locally who are called the Local Leadership Group, and they've really advised and supported and directed the project, and they did a great piece of work late last year to think about, so how are we going to do this work, who can be involved, how do we want to focus our energies here in Waikato, and that was put to government at the end of last year and was signed off by Cabinet in December. So green light, which was great. So we're in the phase of really setting up so that we can begin in July. So these 6 months are kind of set up time. We're employing a few people to help us do the work. We kind of do, think about how we're actually going to put the great ideas and philosophy into practice here in the Waikato. And as I say, we start in July for 2 years. So what will it look like? And like Enabling Good Lives isn't a thing, it's not a place you go to, it's not a service you get, it's more of an approach and a concept really. So clearly one of the main things that families and disabled people tell us is that the systems are really hard to find your way around, be it in education, be it in disability support, or be it in after school stuff with the Ministry of Social Development. It's all pretty hard work. So we're really trying to simplify, which isn't always easy, but what we're trying to aim for. So what will we do? And there's just a couple of slides about this before I finish. I think essentially if people choose to participate in Enabling Good Lives, it's really about us getting to know you and you getting to know us. So where you're at, where you want to be, what your goals are, what you're hoping to achieve in your life. What's your good life? What's your vision for how you want your life to be? And we've got a key role to support you to connect into existing community and existing networks. Might be paid services, it might be community groups, it might be building your relationships so that you have a kind of a connected life, and really helping you to explore your choices and options. Because one of the things that's really difficult for everyone in the disability world is there's so much information, it's hard to work your way through it and find out what's the bit that'll make the biggest difference for me. And I know with the speakers talking today, it's quite complex, all the different parts of government doing all different things, and some rules about some things and not about others. So we hope to be one of the people who can assist you to kind of work out all the big bits of the puzzle and which way you want to go through stuff. The other probably significant difference within Enabling Good Lives is around resources. So if and when disability support money is needed and that makes sense for you to achieve your goals and your supports, it's going to be structured quite differently to the current systems. And as I said before, it is a demonstration. We are trying to do things differently, and the Waikato leadership group have been really clear. We want to actually try things quite differently. So within Enabling Good Lives here, the monies from those different ministries will come into one pool, so it comes into Enabling Good Lives, and it will be allocated differently, and so the result will be one pool of money for you or your family member. You'll know what that money is, similar to individualised funding, and you'll have the choices about how that money is used. And as Maria said, there are guidelines for that, and we will work to those government guidelines as well. So it's sort of like individualised funding, but more than in a sense because it's across government ministries, and it's wider than some of the limitations of individualised funding, which in Waikato is only for your home and community supports, which is only one part of disability supports that people can access. So the other thing is if you're in Enabling Good Lives, and as a choice, the current services and ministries and options all exist for you as well. This is another one that the government's trying. You can make some choices about who assists you if you want ongoing support to kind of practically work out how you put this into action, how you achieve your goals. And that could be someone in your network, it could be a provider, it could be an agent or an advocate or a family member. You're going to have some choices about who manages your money. It might be you, it might be someone else that you decide on, it might be a service provider, it might be an individualised funding host such as Manawanui. And also you've got some choices about who manages your supports. So once again, that could be yourself, it could be a family member, or it could be someone that you choose, or a service provider or agency. And I think the other role for us as Enabling Good Lives small team is to check in with you and see how it's going. Is it working for you? And if it's not, how can we make it work better? So essentially, one of the main aims of Enabling Good Lives is to make it feel more comfortable, the system, that it's clearer, you're more in control, you have more options, and you have straightforward and simple information. And some of the chaos of the system is really the backroom chaos. Some of the stuff that you guys have to work with day in, day out to get things happening in your families, that's often about the system sorting that out. And part of our role as an Enabling Good Lives is to try and sort some of those system issues and then give good feedback to government about how we make the system more straightforward and clear for people going forward. Yeah, so that's us. Thank you.
Well, hi everyone, I'm Robin O'Neill, and this lovely being beside me is my daughter Erin. Erin is 22 years old, and she's been out in the big wide world for 1 year and 4 months. And you would have heard before when she was doing a bit of a giggle when the Manawanui lady was chatting, Erin loves money, so the idea of being in control of her life and how things work is very appealing to her. Transition was something that I put off. I was dreadful. And the Oz teacher at the school was dreadful as well, because that was me. So I didn't get much support from myself when it came to this. But we have been very fortunate to have a wonderful team through the Ministry of Education, who very gently and sometimes a little bit more firmly gave me wonderful kicks up the butt to get myself organised to help Erin to move into this whole thing of transition. And through that, we made contact with CCS as our provider, and Erin and Ray over here share the same wacky sense of humour. And so the combination of the two of them has been a huge success in trying to get our lives a little bit more organised. And the first thing that we did was this wonderful path. I didn't want to do a path to begin with, because I thought it was going to show the things that we hadn't been able to achieve. I thought it was going to be another one of these deficit models of doing things. And I was so thrilled to find that it wasn't the outcome. We saw through doing this path process all of the wonderful things that Erin had achieved in her life so far, all of the positive things that had happened for her, and all of the possibilities that we had going forward. So this little document here has become like our big long-term plan. And many of those things on the big 2015 thingy at the end there, we're actually doing. It's not just something that's on a piece of paper, it's something that we're able to achieve. We've been oddbods when it has come to transition. Oddbods in many ways, really, but with transition, we didn't buy into an immediate solution. Like, we didn't go to the idea services and say, you know, we want to attend your day programs with you. We've done our own thing, and Erin is the boss. Erin likes to Erin has very strong opinions about how things are going to be, and but she only has yes-no answers, so we have to use a wonderful array of questioning techniques to try and find out what it is that she wants to do during her day. So what our week looks like is we purchase our services through our individualised funding and through our money thankfully given to us through the Ministry of Social Development, thank you, to pay for the caregivers that Erin has chosen. So she goes to a friend's place for 2 days a week and hangs out and does things with them, does baking and goes swimming and helps look after babies and walks the dog and gets involved with all of the things that their family are going on with. We buy into the Idea Services art program called SANS 1 day a week, which Erin absolutely loves. It's the most amazing program. We were helping out with the school garden on one afternoon a week. Erin went to the Waikato Waldorf School and they had this wonderful community garden and we used to go there and sell veggies, but yeah, Erin decided that this year she didn't want to do that anymore because all of the people that she knew from school had moved on. So when she was selling the veggies at the gate at the end of the day, the usual people weren't coming up to have a chitter-chatter with her because they'd all gone. So Mother tried very hard to convince her to keep going. But Erin wasn't having a bar of it. And I like that. I like the idea that as an adult she's making those choices in her life. It annoys the heck out of me because now I've got to think, well, what are we going to do on a Friday? And I know that she's probably got lots of ideas in her head, but I have to go through all that process again of, you know, all these yes-no questions. What are the things we've got available? Which things do we want to try first? All of these things have to happen again. So I think the only constant in our lives is change, and sometimes that change can be frustrating, but it's also very exciting. And the idea of individualised funding, of choices in community living, of all of these wonderful new programs that are coming in that we can take part in are making a huge difference to the way that people like Erin can have more control over their own lives. And so good on you government people for getting sorted, and we hope that there are other providers whose services we can tap into as time goes on. So that's us. Thank you.
Hello everyone, thank you for this opportunity to speak to you all today. I'm 27. I've been living away from home for the last coming up 10 years, and in that time I have attended university. I've graduated with a Bachelor of Social Science. I have held 2 different jobs, and now I'm working at creating my own business as an independent public speaker, advocate and mentor. Going back to the beginning of my experiences in school, I attended community-based mainstream education right from the age of kindergarten. I had a lot of support throughout school and kindergarten and high school with teacher aides from my parents and a number of other people. But right from the early days, I was part of choosing who it was that provided my support, who were my teacher aides, and those kinds of decisions. I've always been encouraged by my parents, sometimes more so than others, to participate and be involved as much as possible with my limitations. So I've always attended the school camps, the school class trips, all of those sorts of things. There are occasions where my classmates were going kayaking or abseiling down hillsides and all sorts of other rather daring and challenging things. And there was no way that I was not going to be participating in some form. So through the tenacity and creative thinking and planning of my teachers, our school principal, and my parents, Josh started, I went abseiling. So that is kind of one of my most standout experiences and memories from my childhood in school, in terms of it being one of the few things that I was absolutely determined not to be doing, but I did it anyway, kicking and screaming. But I think some of those sorts of experiences where my limits were pushed, where my limits were tested, really was a very good preparation for me to kind of learn more about my capacity to be able to overcome obstacles, to overcome fear, and to go out and try new things. So that, I think, that amongst other experiences really helped me to be better prepared for my more recent years of living independently and going through university and now in the career sort of workplace stage of my life. I think there are obviously a lot of challenges when you're coming to looking at what you want to do as an individual leaving school. For me, I was very lucky in that I had quite a strong idea of what I wanted to do. I saw myself as working in the humanities field, so a counsellor or a psychologist. And through the course of my studies, I realised that I really didn't like boxes. I really didn't like labels, even more so than I had already thought. So I decided that perhaps the constricted nature of how I perceived counsellors having to operate in, I decided that I'd rather be a mentor and a coach and a public speaker and hopefully help families and individuals in a more open, abstract kind of take it one person at a time kind of approach. because I've been very lucky in my own experience that the people who had assisted me in my journey had that philosophy in mind in their approach with working with me. I'm not really sure what else I can share with you, but I think just the fact that when you're looking at what you want to do, think about what your passions are, think about what your interests are, and don't forget the power of networking, because that has been the hugest benefit for me and my family in overcoming obstacles is the collective power of the resources within our networks, within our communities, and not being afraid to go out and ask questions and ask for help. Because, 10 years or so ago, when we were looking at how am I going to leave home, how am I going to go and study at university, which I was absolutely determined I was going to do, and something that also scared my parents pantsless. It was a big thing to kind of try and make sense of and to consider how we could make it possible, because at that time we didn't know anybody else doing what I wanted to do. There was no template out there to follow. Things like individualised funding were in the trial phases, so it wasn't something that was widely known about. And it took us a lot of research, a lot of writing letters, a lot of phone calls, a lot of asking questions, and not giving up on what my goal was, what my vision was. And I was very lucky to have come across the support of some amazing people and amazing organisations that helped me progress into my after school years. And since then I've just continued to grow and find new experiences. And now I use individualised funding. I have done for about 5 years now. I employ my own staff. I manage my own funding. And it's one of the greatest changes in my level of personal freedom and personal choice that I could possibly hope for. So I hope that people going into the future will have more and more of these opportunities for freedom of choice, freedom of expression, and following your own path. And it just keeps getting easier with these new programs like EGL and individualised funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Tegan. That brings to a close the formal presentations that we have. Our speakers are going to be available over a cup of tea shortly to ask any questions that you might have of them. The presentation today is going to be made available via video on a few of the websites that are represented here today, and I thank Noel Morris for making that possible for us. One of the things that we haven't talked about at all today, and we haven't even attempted to cover, are the legal issues that come about when a young person moves into adulthood. Parent to Parent have arranged an evening with a local lawyer who specialises in disability issues, and Carol has got some pamphlets about that on the Parent to Parent table. If you're interested in that, take one and you'll know more about that. We're going to be repeating this session this evening at 7 o'clock. If you think that there's anybody else who might be interested in coming along and learning about transition from school. But before that, please feel free to join us for a cup of tea or coffee. Look at the people and visit the people around the room, ask questions of our presenters, and I'm sure you'll join with me in thanking them